our spring digital programs this spring. It's supported by a grant from the Bridge Street Fund, a special initiative of Mass Humanities. The digitization of the collection of more than 200 glass slides, all of them more than 100 years old, was funded via our Facebook page by the following generous supporters: M.A. Wendelowski Farm, Holly Haas, Carol Wazerloos, Amy Wendelowski, Kathy Rogers, Jennifer Lyons, Carrie Ann Motika Goigan, and Joellen McKenzie. So thanks to all of you and to Mass Humanities for helping us to preserve history in general and Hatfield history in particular. Because these images are now digitized, we can share them with you on a website. We'll tell you about it at the end of the meeting. And now it's showtime. So I'm handing the program over to our program moderator, Kathy Gow.
Thanks, Rob. Anyway, I think people have already heard this tonight, but I'm the curator of the Hatfield Historical Museum. I'm also a board member of the Hatfield Historical Society. And just also want to note that the curator position is funded by the Hatfield Historical Society. We manage the collection of the Hatfield Historical Museum and the Hatfield Farm Museum for the town of Hatfield. So as you probably heard that weird little voice from outside, we are recording this program. So if you don't want your face showing up in a little box on the side anywhere, you should turn your camera off. Most of the time we will be sharing screen, so it'll just be a few boxes showing up on the side with a bigger picture in the middle. Normally we have people post their questions in the chat, which you can do by typing on the side. But for some inexplicable reason, when I was setting chat controls before setting up the meeting, I seem to have eliminated the chat altogether. So I'm sorry about that, but it means if you have a question during the program, just jot down a little note so that you can ask it at the end, and we'll just have you ask it in person. And I was going to have Liz Denny, our new grants coordinator for this year, be the chat person. So Liz is just being the general co-host now and managing admitting people in the waiting room. And everyone should be muted unless you're one of the presenters. If somebody's, mic goes on ever so often, like so for instance, John Pease, I think we were hearing some, paper crumbling or something in the background of yours for a while. So I don't know if you have the capacity to mute yourself there or not. Yeah, so maybe that helps. Anyway, let's see, if you're new to Zoom, I'm not sure there is anybody new to Zoom anymore, but and you want to switch from the gallery view to the speaker view, if you're on a laptop or a PC, probably that control is at the top right where it says view, and you just kind of toggle back and forth between one or the other. If you want to see like a big speaker at once, or if you want to see all the little boxes. And if it's on an iPad, I think the controls are maybe also at the top, but I'm not so sure about an iPad. So that's kind of just the Zoom housekeeping. So without further ado, we're going to get into our program. Is Joe Malinowski here? There you are, Joe. Okay, great. So I would ask Joe to unmute here. I'm clicking the little S to unmute button. So do you have a little thing showing up on your screen, Joe, that you can click? There you go.
Yeah,
hi there.
I'm pretty Zoom savvy. That's how we've been living for over a year now. So
exactly, yeah. So so I'm going to start with Joe because that's really where the story starts. Joe's a farmer. He's based in Hadley, and
not a farmer.
Okay, you're not a farmer. You've been described as a farmer in a lot of these things.
No, I have never been a farmer.
So how would you describe yourself?
I'm a retired state employee who is a business agent presently with a labor union.
All right, then. Well, I'm glad we have that recorded so that we can stop identifying you as a farmer. We'll change that in the website as soon as we can.
Yeah, no. Actually, my father wasn't a farmer either. So it's kind of far removed. He worked for the Department of Agriculture, though. So
it's funny how these sorts of things, like they get into the paper or whatever, and pretty soon, like, you're a farmer when you never ever were a farmer, or no one in your family was.
yeah.
That's funny. Okay. So anyway, the first question I want to ask you is, when did you first see these glass plates, as best you recall? Or, what do you remember about them?
What I remember is when my grandfather passed away in the late 60s, and he lived on Prospect Street up kind of near the Double B's. It's the last house on your left before Prospect Court. It's kind of was a mustard colored house with a small 2-car garage unattached. And when he passed away, my father and his brothers, he had 3 brothers, 1 sister. And his sister was actually Judge Parada's mother, Betty Parada's mother, and she was married to Joe Parada Sr. So when they cleaned the houses out after my grandfather passed, there was 3 houses on Prospect Street. There was where the family homestead, where my father and his siblings grew up, and then there was going towards the Legion on the left. There was a large 2-story colonial that's still there. And then there was a small bungalow after that that's kind of been remodeled, and it's got natural wood siding on it. They split up everything, stuff came out of the houses, and for whatever reason, my father took these slides home and he put them in the attic of his garage at 68 Huntington Road, Hadley, which, it had been a working farm at one point. So that's as simple as it was. I was, probably 10 years old, maybe younger. And they were up there and put up there in the garage. And that's where they sat until this past year when last June, actually, or earlier than that, it was May, when my daughter decided to move to the family homestead and took that over. And so I was cleaning the garage out, and I had known they were there. My kids had known they were there. They took them out and looked at them, and there was probably more slides because I know they broke some. And that was it. So I knew Linda Hannum was into photography, and I reached out to her and asked her about them, if she had any experience or knew anything about it. And she said she didn't really, but she knew someone, which was Sloan. And that's where it all started. There's no romantic story. There's no big deal about it. It wasn't a magical find of any sort. It just was something that,
maybe that's your opinion.
Well, it is my opinion. Yeah. I mean, so Sloan took them and he cleaned some up and he printed them, and they were really amazing. And Linda, I think, or Sloan, I don't know who did the research on H.L. Kingsley. And it was an interesting story of who he was. And his brother was a artist too. And, our thoughts are, and I'm sure if you went back far enough in the records, you could probably find, and my guess is one of those houses on Prospect Street probably belonged to him or his brother, and that's probably where this stuff was left behind. Mm-hmm. And as you know, people of the older generation, which, my father would be over 100 now if he was alive, they saved everything. So when we cleaned out, after my parents passed, we cleaned a lot of stuff out. And among it was, we knew some things we wanted to save. And I always thought these were just really neat. And after they got printed, and Linda and I talked, and, she came up with the idea to give them back to the town of Hatfield, which was great. My father and his brothers, my father left Hatfield when he was about 20 and moved all the way to Hadley. His brothers lived in Hatfield, and his sister lived in Hatfield pretty much their whole lives.
Yeah. That's great.
So bringing them back.
Anyway, we just want to thank you so much, Joe, because it is a treasure to us and seems kind of magical. So I'm going to let Linda pick up the story from here. And Linda, I think I've set it so that other participants can screen share. So do you want to just try that and see if that works?
Absolutely.
Hopefully you'll be better at getting into it than I was.
Yeah. And just, thank you everyone for, being here, being alive during this time. And it's one little fascinating tidbit, just as we look at it, it's an absolutely glorious evening. And we look at all these pictures that are in black and white, and we just think people actually lived in black and white back then. But these pictures, if they were colorized, it would look exactly like it does today. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go to Lightroom Classic, which is, do you all see a big box there? just kind of give me a thumbs up. Great. So this is what Joe on June 14th, 2020 brought to my house, or messaged me about. He says, I've got some things I'd like to show you. And I think there's pictures, you think you could do something with it? So I don't handle glass plate negatives, but let me just see what's here and take a peek. So this is how they came. This is what it looked like on the inside. They're all kept separate, these glass plates, so they don't touch each other to lose their, the quality, and the image doesn't run off or scratch each other. So there were 3 boxes that look just like that. These are box number 2 and number 3 that he brought over, but then also these 2 other crates. Kathy showed this slide earlier. And the whole thing was just like this clue. What were the clues here? How could we figure out when were the photos taken? Who took them? Well, I love clues that are obvious. L.H. Kingsley of Hatfield, Mass. took the photos. Further evidenced by, this is what the person, they would ship things off to be developed. These glass plates would be developed. And this is 1894. You can see the date here. And interesting back then, like we're all using phones. If you look at my image of me, this takes amazing photos, and it's got 30,000 photos are stored on this as we speak. But back then, this was some of the photos the plates came in actual manila sleeves. He on this one wrote the subject, which was a landscape. Upright means he had shifted the camera angle instead of whatever landscape, it was horizon. Upright, north from Mount Tom. The lens, it shows the name of the lens, the plate that it was shot onto. The exposure was 40 seconds at f-stop 2, whatever. But December 12th, 1892. It's a long time ago in the sunset. And I think this is a developer. This is where he sent them to. The glass plate that was actually inside of this sleeve was fascinating. This is the one that was inside of that sleeve. And if you look at it, it's upright. Now, photographers back then didn't have Photoshop or anything and to enhance photos other than working with the actual plate itself. And Sloan could probably go into this much more. But remember, that was shot in December. So you could see there's snow in the background. But the photographer actually, you see this white tree, he enhanced all of this fake white snow by actually either painting onto the negative or scratching off the actual image, what was there. So it would develop as white. This is a fascinating photo looking north, because if I'm going to zoom in, and the detail is stunning on this. This right here is the railroad bridge that travels between Northampton and goes to Holyoke. So that bridge is actually still there. And there's a waterway that's still here in the front. It's funny, I'm using my hand on the screen as if you could see it. That goes goes out into the Oxbow. So this goes into the Oxbow, this water here. This is either a paper mill or just a lumber factory. So all of this, you see, all of this white noise are logs that have been floated down the river. And you can see the Oxbow goes around here, all around this side. It doesn't show it in here, but if you can see my hand, the cursor, the water would come under this bridge. This bridge is still here. This is where the Mount Tom Box Company is currently positioned. I think there's a foundation for one of these brick buildings that's still in there. But if I can zoom in even closer and closer, it's crazy. You can go up to I don't know, 400 in. It's just, you could see the detail. Those are piles and piles and piles and piles of lumber. Look at all of this.
Linda, I feel like I want to gasp for everyone. I mean, the amount of detail that's there is oh my God.
It's stunning. It is stunning. And Sloan did a phenomenal job cleaning these and scanning them. So I'm going to fly through some pictures just quickly to show you a little bit of what I kind of came up with. So I'm like, all right, who the hell is L.H. Kingsley? Well, L.H. Kingsley, let me just Google it. So the Hatfield, the Massachusetts, I don't know, 1895, I think, almanac or something. You see yellow highlighted down here. He came up as a photographer. I'm like, so that was another clue that helped indicate who he was. Then I'm going to now hit into some of the actual photographs. This is taken from the house that you can drive up to on Mont Tom. And you can see in here, this is now land. This little spit here has been filled in, and that's where Mitch's Marina is. You can see up here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I won't go to 400, it's a little too much. Go to 100. Up in here is Hadley. This is the town common in Hadley over here where my mouse is going. And this is the, Route 9 would go right by this church across here. And this is, I think this is called West Street, and this is East Street. I always want to go north and south, but it isn't. So that's a very cool photo. The clarity of it is stunning. Keeping going. He did a lot of photography. He was a commercial photographer hired by companies to take photos of products. I'll show those later. He did a lot of portraiture, trying to capture people in, he pretended it was like natural settings, but obviously look at one of the, the chair legs is balanced on a brick, but again, the clarity, I'm not going to zoom in on this one, but you could see freckles on this dude's hand. It's like amazing. This one is just stunning. Look at his hand. Look at that. It's just incredible, the detail. And this is just, the newspaper, you can read it. If I flipped it upside down, it's a dry goods in a department. So very, very, very amazing.
If I can jump in, Linda.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm not sure if that's the picture, but there's one it's a couple actually. And if you look at the picture, the chair is propped up on bricks on the back left-hand corner.
Yeah, that's
this one. I think it's that one right there.
Yeah, look at that.
Look at the corner of the chair. That just cracked me up. That amazed me when I saw that.
Yeah. And these, it's interesting, like these are their Sunday bests, the clothes that they would, and here's another thing about this, and you'll see this later on. These, like back to that manila envelope, this was for 40 seconds for this to be that clear, that they had to not move. Sometimes they're 20 seconds. So in this one, when you zoom in, I'll go 400 on this, look at her eyes, they're very, very blurry because it's very difficult to keep perfectly still. In any imagery where there are children or animals, there's always a blur involved. And but like, and this guy, he didn't move. He had it figured out. Next picture is probably my drop dead favorite photo. Look at these guys. Come on. There's just hilarious. This gentleman in the front features prominently in a number of the photos throughout it. I don't know if he is L.H. Kingsley. I have a feeling I'm leaning that way because of a couple of the other images. Fascinating on this guy, there's something written on his hat. Not quite sure what it is. Like maybe Sloan might be able to zoom in a little bit closer, but something Brookhouse, this is way before. I mean, it's nothing for us to wear shirts with Bruins and Coca-Cola or anything advertising. This is back then, this was very rare to have clothing that advertised, Calvin Klein and, but this is, I really love this picture. Like this dude here, he's definitely a troublemaker. You could just see it clear as day. The next picture, I was in the very first box that Joe brought over. And I just looked at that and I said, oh my God, look at this. Look at these guys drinking a pint of beer, stopping off at the Guild Tavern or whatever it's pretending to look like.
You picked two of the pictures that Sloan's going to talk about as well.
Okay, great. I won't go into too much detail then. I'll keep buzzing through it. But this is staged. It's not a real event. You can tell that this sign was just hung by strings. But I'll skip over that if Sloan's going to talk in a bit. Then another gentleman made to look either like a doctor. This is his cart he would carry, and he's either got his doctor case over here, and he's perhaps reading up on some medical stuff. I don't know why the potatoes are there, except it's Hatfield, and we love potatoes. And there's the next couple of pictures are not from Hatfield. They're photos of recognizable areas, but they're not Hatfield photos themselves. This one is stunning, and I believe this is in Holyoke. I'm not positive, but it just reminds me of the canal leading, the river going through Holyoke. That the imagery of this man, I made up this whole story that this is his son. He owns this boat. Not sure what this is over here. It's something that either pipes grain out into something, out onto a coal, it could be, onto these barges that move things. I don't know if this is a pile of coal here. That's an amazing picture. The next one is in the corner of 116 and 47, where Hadley, Sunderland, Amherst. I don't believe this house is still standing here. If this is the same street, there's a church right here on the left. This house up on Sugarloaf is not there. You guys all have probably heard the story that did burn down at some point in time. There's another image of that, but this is very cool. It just shows Amherst is one way, Montague Hadley the other way. On the side here, it says South Deerfield and I believe Greenfield. It's hard to zoom in on that one. Let me go back to fitting it in. The next one here also shows, this is in Hatfield because it's showing a very distinct view of that same building up on top. I'll zoom in a little bit more. You can really see the actual building up there. And
I don't think that's from a shot. I don't think that's shot from Hatfield, Linda. I think that's either like Whately or Deerfield. South.
Yeah, it could be Whately or up in that. It's probably not Deerfield, but close enough. Then the other one, this is obviously Mount Tom. There's several views of this. This building, I don't think it's in its entirety is still there. I don't know if this part is still there. I don't know if there was a partial fire for that one. But it's just, there's quite a few of that. They're awesome. This one here is the beginning of a Hatfield scene. The next 4 or 5 pictures real quick are Hatfield. And this was, you can see again, he enhanced, this is not a real cloud. The photographer added that in afterwards. And I believe this house is still in Hatfield. And there's a plaque over the door. I can't quite read it. Maybe Sloan could actually see that better in his equipment. And these next bunch of photos are from a fireman's muster. This is Hatfield Fire Department. This is that's the fire truck on the right, dressed like a bride. I can't tell if it's 1899 or 18, I can't quite tell that date. But this was a competition. They would get together and have different things that they would compete against other fire departments. These gentlemen are dressed up as barbers. And, the guy up here is actually shaving somebody here. Whoops, we don't need to go that close in. But it's just hilarious. And the whole thing with this horn, that shows up quite a bit. In one of the other slides, you'll see on this carriage, the Kingsleys were apparently, I think they were pretty well off back in the day. Like here's a perfect one. It's the same event. This, if I zoom in right here, that's the Elbridge, is that his name, Kathy, the brother?
Right.
E.P. Kingsley, right here. That's his carriage.
Yeah, I don't know what his middle name was, and because of the K and because of the E, we kind of assume it was Elbridge Kingsley, but yeah. I suppose it could be,
I would assume.
To be verified.
Yeah. And here's another one. You can see, obviously, the women are pretty crystal clear, but the horses' faces are pretty blurry because of the exposure. This one, same thing. These are, I'm not sure what they're dressed up as, sailors or look like Greek fisherman hats. This is also a different trailer, but it also has a Kingsley. And I can't tell if this is LH. It, to me, pulls, or that's an E. I'm not sure, but someone who is a little bit better at deciphering that could figure that one out. Same thing, different group of women, beautiful courage. Might be the same group, actually. And this one was kind of interesting. I stumbled upon this late. It looks like these folks here is I Drive a Crescent team. So I don't know what, it would be interesting for someone to poke around what that means. She's actually being pulled by these 3 boys on these bikes. It's pretty interesting. Next one here is, again, here's your building, Hatfield Historic Society here. And this could have been the same event where the firemen's muster. I thought this was Hadley for a while there, but then
it's Hatfield.
That is definitely Hatfield. You guys corrected me on that one. Now here's the 1-room schoolhouse. All of the children are holding books. I won't go to 400, I'll go to 100. And you can see them all holding books in their hands, looking very happy to be at school. This is the teacher here. The no screens in the window, must have been nice and hot back in the day. The next photo shows, and I'm going to kind of wrap up quickly here. This is a very typical, there's like 40 of these kinds of shots in front of a home. The family is spread out. This is that same gentleman that was in that first picture that had with all the guys that I really liked. This woman shows up prominently in a lot of them as well in the posed studio shots. That we can see.
Meg's going to talk about that when she gets
great. This is, let me go back to, you guys did a big production about the factory that made the spindle
Porter McLeod machine.
Porter McLeod. This is a great shot of showing all the workers hanging out the window. This is and you have this photo, which is great that we have the actual negative that now has been donated back. Thank you, Joe, to the society. This is a lot of the kind of photography that he did. What's fascinating of this is all of this here has not been scratched off or painted over, but this part here, the white, is actually painted around the image here. So that was kind of photoshopping back in the late 1800s. This is another great shot showing people picking up grain at a farm. I'm going to just show you one thing about this picture, and I don't want to mess anyone, but see the photo they're looking at? That's the picture that we looked at, showing the way back here. Hang on a second. That's this picture. So I wish we could find where this photo album is, because this is a photo album full of L.H. Kingsley's photos. And I'm like, oh my God, that would be amazing to have that. This picture here, the woman is looking at a photo. This is actually the school in the center of Hadley and the church in the center of Hadley. I actually flipped this upside down, 1, 2, and I zoomed in to figure out what picture is that. There it is. It's the school that is not being used right now. And there's the church in Hadley. So that was kind of a fascinating find. We go back to this and fit it.
But not one of the glass slide images.
No, we don't have that slide. We don't have that slide. I think maybe Joe, that's one of the ones your kids were playing with and used for skeet practice.
And so Linda, probably just need you to try to wrap up soon,
yep.
Just so there's time for the others.
All right, so there's the last two. This is L.H. Kingsley's brother. This is the artist. It's shown in a wagon that he used to pull, an ox wagon. Here's a picture of it. This is L.H. Kingsley, I believe, and this is his brother. This is his painting studio where he worked. If I zoom in, you could see an actual image of a painting that he worked in. I'm going to go back one. I mean, you could see this is shot in the same day where he's actually in this. And if you zoom in, I would be so awesome to find this photo, this painting somewhere that he's actually holding. You know, I mean, it's just the fact that you can see freckles on his hand. It's just stunning photography. So this one is an amazing find. Just beautiful, beautiful photography. I believe this is a later one of Eldridge pointing at either a picture. This is odd that he's pointing to Maine. Perhaps that is on the Maine coast. This is a map that shows Boston and Maine. And then the last couple of things, this is interesting. This is the Ben Waite. You guys are familiar with that. I find this one, especially Kathy, you just talked about this horn and you have that. I wonder if this is it. It's missing that little piece right there, but I think that's the same horn that you showed. And to bring it back home, this is your home base. This is where it all started. Hatfield Historic Society. That's my report.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda. And I just want to say for everyone that, I mean, this donation wouldn't have happened without Joe, of course, as the donor and his family saving these all these years. But also it wouldn't have happened without Linda, who did the research work of figuring out who it was. And she really, you know, did a lot of work to find out where was the best place for these slides to end up. And I think, you know, the Smithsonian was being talked about at some point, who I think would have been delighted to have this collection. And I'm so glad that Linda and Joe made the decision for them to stay in Hatfield, you know, back where they started. It's really nice when, yes, thank you for the heart. It's really nice when history can stay in its local place and there's a place that can take care of it, you know? So next I want to talk to Sloan. Sloan, are you right there? Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Let me just get to my correct. Okay. And of course, Linda's already showed a few of your images, but she won't have your take on it, so that's all right. So are you seeing the couple on the steps there?
I am seeing a couple of steps, yes.
Okay, and I feel like maybe you need to do your volume up a little higher because you're not very loud.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's a little better. Can everybody else hear him okay?
Yeah,
Well,
well,
you have to say something.
I have to say something, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, I mean, I think you're going to tell us about a few images and what they say to you and what they say to you about Kingsley as a photographer. But I just wanted to ask you also if you can tell us just briefly about what kind of equipment or process that LH is likely to have used.
Sure. Do you want to maybe on-screen share for a moment, and I can
Sure.
actually, so people can see? So I've actually been a photographer for 25 years now, and I primarily shot film for most of that time. I only recently started shooting digitally, kind of kicking and screaming into the digital world. I shot primarily 4x5 film, which is obviously not glass plate, but about the size of what Kingsley was shooting with. And so I actually have a camera that, although modern, is probably very similar to what he was using. So I'm gonna, this is my 4x5 camera. So this is a bellows system camera. It's got a rails system on it. And you have all these different adjustment layers that you have to do. And the way that you actually look at the image is you look through this glass screen here. And if we were to cover this a little bit better, you could probably see behind me upside down. So everything is in it upside down. You can actually view through the lens. And that's probably exactly what he was doing because the images are obviously in focus. So he's actually able to do some focusing. He'll have different rails on a bellows system of some kind. He would have had like a cover over his head looking like this. I actually have a cover for this. And then he would have framed his shot, figured it out. And then he would have put the film in there and he would have pulled a slide out that would cover it. And then he would just click the shutter and timed it probably on a stopwatch and then press the shutter again to close it. So I'd actually have a shutter that's very similar. So I actually can press it once and it clicks the shutter open. I press it again, clicks the shutter closed. This camera being more modern, I actually do have shutter speeds, which he would not have had. He wouldn't have had such a thing as shutter speeds. That wouldn't have existed at that time period. This is what I would use. So this is a dark slide. Obviously, he wouldn't have something like this made of plastic, but he would have something very similar to this for his glass negative. So he would have had the negatives. He would have had to load it into something in the dark, which is what I would have to do too. So these slides come out and the film goes in there. And you actually, in the modern film, you actually have little notches on the film and you can actually feel in the dark. So this is a piece of film. There's a little notch on it. So as a photographer at that time period with these glass plates, a trick my photographer teacher told me years ago was if you're in the dark room and you're trying to load film and you can't tell which side the emulsion is, you actually put your tongue on it because the emulsion side will actually have a more metallic-y taste to it than the glass side or the plastic side in this case, because you'd have to put it in emulsion side out. So you put the film in there, emulsion side out, and then, in the dark, you'd be doing this in the dark and close it up. And then this would, let's see if I can do this with this heavy camera. This goes into the back of the camera. So after he did the whole shot, set it all up, focused it, shutter's still closed, he pulls out one of these, presses the button, times it, takes the picture, puts in whatever kind of covering he's got on his film, puts it back in there, takes this out, and then does the same thing again to take another shot. Wow. So it's definitely not like rapid fire shooting at all. Part of the reasons why I loved shooting with this camera so much is because it does slow you down. It gives you a lot more connection to your photography. And there's definitely a lot of that with his photography. He clearly was not an amateur. He certainly knew exactly what he was doing. His compositional skills and his ability were really quite phenomenal. Of a lot of the photographers I've seen from that time period, he actually had a lot of talent, and I'm surprised that he doesn't have a little bit more of a recognized name. This photo is one of my favorite photos because of the composition of it. As I think Joe mentioned about the brick, when Linda showed this one, I think that's just wonderful that the brick is there and not hiding it at all. I mean, it's part of the image, but the overall composition as a photographer looking at this, it's, you know, he's using the rule of thirds, which is something that goes back to Renaissance painting days, but it became very much part of photography. If you were to split this into threes, you would see that their heads are placed in a certain spots. You're going to have this wall is not perfectly centered. They're not perfectly centered on front of the doorway. The niceness of the darkness of the house with the stairwell just coming out of the darkness is really quite beautiful. And as Linda pointed out, you know, their eyes are a little bit blurry, especially hers, because sitting for that long would have had to been, you know, hard for a lot of people. You notice a lot of his photography of people is almost always outdoors. And that's because he would have been shooting with a camera that would have not had aperture. So the cameras at that time period would have had a single aperture, and the shutter speed would have been determined by the photographer himself. So the two stop, one stop that Linda was pointing out earlier, that's in reference to the shutter speed. So if you were shooting a photo and you figured out the light that you needed to use to expose the film, if you did it to half stop, what you would do is you'd actually expose it for half the time than you would need to. So you'd purposely underexpose or overexpose depending on the stops that you would do, which is nowadays what we're able to do a little bit with aperture on our modern cameras. The nice thing about the camera he was shooting with is that the aperture was likely very, very small. So those of us in the photography world know that the smaller your aperture opening is, the more crystal clear your focus is across the depth of field. And if you look at this photo, you can see that the box that's very close to us, the man's shoe that's closest to us is in focus, but even the slat wall and the shutters are in focus, which are, you know, a good probably 15 feet away. If you look at his landscape shots, like the really great shot Linda showed at the beginning there, there you saw all of those little perfect in focus buildings in the far distance, but you also saw a really sharp focus up front. So he was likely shooting with a very small aperture, something akin to f/64, if in modern terminology, which, if you know Ansel Adams, he was a member of what was called the f/64 club. So 64 is a very, 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 very tiny aperture. And if you shoot with that, you need a lot of light, but you also get really, really crisp images throughout your entire depth of field. There's no soft focus in the distance. Things don't fall out of focus. This also would have been helpful for focusing in general, because he wouldn't have been able to like focus like this. He'd have to be like, you know, focusing with a rail system like I showed in the other camera. I like this image a lot too, because I think as I talked with Kathy, he was doing these kinds of photography where he was having people go into their house and rummage around and find like old clothing and old knickknacks and sort of create these kind of like sort of tableaus of life from before, like in the past, even though like to us, this is ancient. Of course, this way that people are dressed is ancient to the people in 1900. As a photographer myself, I do a lot of portrait work where I am actually doing a lot of sort of stage things using lots of props from older time periods. And so this photo definitely spoke to me in that way. Again, compositionally, the way that they're placed, the way that that bottle's placed, the white pipe that's placed on the table, whatever that little other object is that's on the table, where the table's placed, the fact that the man's cane is leaning against there. I believe that Kingsley wasn't just a photographer, he was very much sort of a stager, and he really knew what he was doing with his composition. So his composition in his people photographs are really quite beautiful, which leads me to this one, which is shot indoors. My theory is that it was probably really bright sunny day, wide open windows, and a long exposure. If you notice, everyone in the photograph is a little soft compared to everything else, but you also notice that nobody's in a very natural position, especially the little girl at the piano. She's clearly not, that's What is she doing? She's staring at her father. She's like not even looking at his face. Her hands in a really odd position. So these people probably had to sit here for like a minute, not moving. And the little boy is just a little bit blurred in his head. The little girl's a little blurrier than the adults. The woman in the chair is definitely a lot more in focus. She seems like she's very good at staying very still. But I like this photo too, because again, this is very much staged. You know, I don't think these people actually had vines growing up along their walls. This could have been shot in some kind of corner of his studio. If you look at the backdrop there, that's actually there. So there's the plants on the one side, there's a backdrop hanging there. I'm actually not even sure if those plants are part of the image or if they're actually part of the backdrop painted on there. But again, a really, really talented photographer. I mean, he definitely knew what he was doing. He had a lot of skill, And I like the fact also that he did a lot of photographs like this, where, you know, you could tell that as photographers, as I'm sure Linda can tell you too, we do a lot of photos that we like to do, but then we do other photos where people are like, hey, will you do this photo for us? Because you're a really good photographer. And we like doing those too, but there's definitely a sort of a different sort of approach when we do that. And this is probably something like that. I'm sure that the Graves family came up to him and they're like, hey, we're having a family reunion and September 12th, 1895, will you take all of our photos? And I wanted Kathy to end on this one because one of the kind of funny sort of things about how things come around and this photo is the fact that this is the Graves family reunion. I've lived in Hatfield for 11 years now. I grew up in Michigan. I have no family in New England, but my mom's side of the family moved to New England in the 1600s. And so I had a lot of family here a long time ago. Before moving to Hatfield, I knew a little bit about my family in New England, but not a whole lot. My mom's side of the family moved to Michigan in the early 1800s. So I had no connection to New England before I moved here. Shortly after moving to Hatfield, I started digging a lot more into my ancestry. My mother's mother was a member of the DAR, so I had a lot of stuff already built up. Using Ancestry.com and a couple other family records, I discovered that I'm actually a direct descendant of the Graves family, the Bardwell family, and the Belding family in Hatfield. So it's kind of bizarre that I'm living in Hatfield growing up in Michigan, moved here 11 years ago. Shortly after moving here, discovered my ancestors lived here 300 years ago. So none of these are my direct descendants, but they're all my cousins in some way, which is very, very bizarre.
Welcome home.
So it's very strange to find that out. You know, so it was Thankful Bardwell married Abraham Graves, and they are my great times 7 grandparents. So that's how I'm related to these people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Sloan. I mean, we could go on with any one of you for a long time, but I'm going to move along. Next, we're going to Bob Osley. So Bob, if you can unmute yourself. Are you able to do that, or do you need me to, one of us to?
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
So we have you and Meg left that we're hoping to finish, you know, maybe a little after 8. So take it away.
Okay. Again, this is a very pristine outdoor scene with a river, a bridge, and if you look in the background, underneath the bridge, there is a dam. That structure off to the right of the dam, left of the dam, up at the level of the bridge, there is a building which turns out to be a mill. And this is, thank you, don't know if you can make that out, but there are other photos of it. I'll point that out later. But
sorry, Bob, I just want to jump in because for people who weren't at our meeting, I'm not sure they know who you are. So if you have joined the meeting since an introduction, this is Bob Osley, who's the president of the Hatfield Historical Society. And he's also a Hatfield native and is very fond of walking around Hatfield, exploring natural sites and trying to figure out what happened there. So I'll let you go back, and just, Bob, when you're ready to move to the next one, just give me a shout.
Okay, the dam that's there, actually we'll find out later, it's a wooden dam that's built on stone structures. It's probably an undershot wheel that's powering the mill because of the low height of the dam. If we could have the next slide, Kathy. This is a scene that is taken at the base of Elm Street across from the Legion, looking over what is now the Bonneville Bridge. And the bridge that we're seeing, that Howe Trust metal bridge, is the same one that we were looking at underneath. This is high water during what looks like a very early spring flood. You can see the snow on the ground. And the building to the left is that dam, correct. And there are some other photos of that building that had a painted advertising sign that says Dr. Jane's Vermicide, which is a patent medicine used for killing worms in your intestine. But anyway, you can see in the background the houses which are on Main Street, and all of the land behind Main Street to the base of Prospect Street is all flooded. Those are still farms. And if you look to the right mid-screen, you'll see a flooded building, but further to the left, you'll see a boat with oars and people in it. Obviously, people were being ferried across this flood, probably from Main Street over to the higher ground on Elm Street. Next slide. I love this picture, one, because of the historic aspect of it, but it also speaks to what kids do. The kids are sitting on some big timbers, and you'll see several of them underneath the bridge. The dam that we saw on that first photograph is no longer a pristine overflow, but a lot of the logs or timbers from that wood-framed dam are now washed out, and the kids are having a ball floating on them. The bridge is built on two stone abutments. My guess is that during that flood, the bridge abutments may have washed out, particularly on the right-hand side of the screen. And Kathy, the next slide. This is the view of the reconstruction of that washed out buttress and what is now Maple Street. You can see the construction workers there. They're rebuilding some of the stonework. All of this done manually. You can see the guy to the right dumping a load of sand or material from a wheelbarrow. And they're continuing to rebuild that stone buttress. Next slide, Kathy. And there's a view of the bridge as it's under construction from the Elm Street side, essentially right adjacent to the current Legion, looking down Maple Street. The bike in the middle, whether that's a worker's bike or they're using that as a roadblock, I don't know. But the building to the left is that mill building. And you can see it kind of hangs or is built over the stone buttress. So it extends down to the water level where the water and the sluice would pass through the building. Okay, next one. Kathy? Yeah, this is, it's marked as a view from Elizabeth Rock, but just to give you some bearings, the water in the background is the Connecticut River. The little peninsula of land sticking out a bit to the left is actually the Hockenham Meadows or the Hadley Meadows. The land to the right is Northampton, and you can see the mountains, the Seven Sisters of the Mount Holyoke Range. In the far background of the water view, that's about where the current Coolidge Bridge would be, somewhere in that area. And there's water beyond that, which I suspect may be flooded water in the aquavit meadows of Hadley. The bridge right in the foreground, I'm sorry, the railroad track in the foreground is currently there. Right below the kid with the dark hat, you'll see a little bit of roadway. There you go. That is more than likely the current Route 5 and 10. Now, in between that road and the railroad track is where 91 goes. And where these kids are is now all the stone has been removed from a quarry. And that is where the, we call it the Earthy Granny Crunchy Market. It's the River Valley Market, thank you, is. So all of that stone that's there was removed. And as a kid, when that was just an open hole or a quarry, we used to refer to it as the stone crusher because it was still active back in the 60s.
That's amazing.
And the kids, if you look at them closely, in some of the other close-ups, particularly of the views on Prospect Street and Hatfield, where the Kingsley's studio is, these kids look a lot like
right, they do.
The kids. So they might be family members, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you so much for giving us that detail of those. Next, I'm going to switch to our last speaker, who is Meg Baker, who's the collections assistant for the Hatfield Historical Museum, and she's also our textile specialist. So Meg, if you can unmute yourself and tell us about some of these images and just let me know when to switch.
Sure. So one of the things that was really interesting as I was putting all of these up on the website is it gave me a chance to sort of sit with each image in a different way than Joe or Linda or Sloan did. And this, to me, in context with all the others, is a photograph of a photograph, because the people are older, the styles are older. And one of the clues that I look for always, because my skill set in, a particular focus is on clothing and textiles, is looking at the clues that I can find in that to help draw out those inferences of, what are the relationships and how do these connect to a larger story. Looking at this image right away, I know, just because of the way that the clothing is structured, that this is a Civil War era picture. These people, everything about them, from the hairstyles, the woman's hat, all the little girls' dresses, the way that the dresses change, like small details in the way that those dresses are constructed change as the wearer ages, is really clear to me. All of them, one of the detail that I look for, and this is a place I could talk about for a long time, the way that all of the shoulder lines drop. The young woman in the back with the plaid is the most easy to see, I think, for us. That we're used to having the arm's eye of our shirt be on our shoulder, and the arm's eye of her shirt is way off the shoulder. And Kathy, I think you have an image from our collection that shows this.
Yep.
So this is a Civil War dress, and at the top you can see where if we draw a line up from the waist and go straight up where we would expect the shoulder to be, you can see that it's actually way off, that there's this huge slope off the side and this big puffy sleeve. And this really gives me a strong clue, looking for the same sorts of clues that every other speaker tonight has looked for to help tell us about these pictures and learn more about them. This, knowing that L.H. Kingsley was shooting in the later 1800s, and then looking at that photo, the details in the clothing tell me that that is a photo of a earlier generation. So he's practicing his craft in a way. Also, if you go back, Kathy, to the picture of the women and girls,
yep.
There's a depth of field issue here that, like Sloan mentioned, because it's a picture of a picture, it's a more flattened, it's a flattered appearance. There's not as much going on. Also, the characters in themselves are tighter packed together, which is not what we've seen in L.H. Kingsley's other slides as much. And then this helps, like using textiles as an eye, as a lens into where what the clothes are, helped a lot. With this next slide. Oh, there's the back.
I just want to say too, sorry, here's the back, which I forgot to show of that collection.
The back is actually, this is great because you can see how like all the construction lines for tailoring, that they're making these complex garments out of lots of little pieces to be very, very frugal with cloth and also really get the fit they want.
Right. And I just want to note that this dress was donated by the Cowles family of Hadley.
Thank you. So this photo, instantly, I can recognize those clothing as like a circa 1880s. And then there's so many extremely clear details in women's clothing throughout the 1800s, where there are bits that could change all the time. Hats and cuffs and collars and neckwear could be fresh every season, but the same skirt, you could wear the same skirt for 10 years and nobody would care. It's not really remarkable. But the young girl in the corner down in, let's zoom in on her. She's the youngest person in the picture, and she is a little fashion princess with this very fancy hat, very, very fancy little like embroideries and things like that. And she's very impressive to me. They're playing tennis. So this is a great picture to me because of the people involved. Zoom out again and we'll look at all the people. So you have this man and the woman opposite him both have tennis rackets. And then these two women in the middle and the young girl. And that's the family. And they're all in sort of not quite Sunday best, but definitely in sort of putting your best foot forward at leisure. They're playing tennis. It's not as formal. But the characters in the background, the woman on the steps and the man driving the cart. And then there's another man by the back door there. This reads to me, looking at their clothing, this is a photo of a family showing all of their wealth in a way. It's a wide shot, the whole house and their servants, that this is a African-American man driving the carriage. I believe that's a woman of color, African-American woman of color who's a maid on the steps. And this is a hired man just positionally and also from what he's wearing, this is a hired man by the back door. That those people are not positioned with the family. They're not at leisure. They're not on the porch by the front door. So we begin to pull more of a understanding in ways of Hatfield social structures. But But the key in this for me, and why I wanted Kathy, or asked Kathy if we could have the other slide as well, is that the clothing gives us a time frame for some of the experiences, or some of the, like, how do we contextualize people of color in Hatfield? And if this had been a picture of a Civil War era, if all the women in this photograph were wearing Civil War era clothes, it would be a very different picture. We would make different inferences. We would wonder, what is this about? You know, what are they saying here? And so it's such an amazing trove of images to help us make those connections between items in our collection, like the dress and, you know, other clothing that we have, and horseshoes and hats, you know, all of the things that are in this picture. And this set of items lets us build more around that. And then another that I wanted to talk about briefly is the studio things, studio photography. As Sloan mentioned, a lot of these look like they're shot in the studio. There's characters, like Linda mentioned, that appear over and over. This woman was so patient. I know by her dress, that's an 1870s-ish dress. And, you know, just using fabric manipulation to make the detail. She's not wearing a lot of different colors or different prints. It's all in like folds and lace and things. So here she's knitting. And then in the next slide, the cat has got the knitting. And these are definitely, to me, feels like practicing having a subject sit for your photography. There's a very simple backdrop. There's the prop chair. There's the prop knitting. Go through, and if you can continue, Kathy. This now has a big fancy backdrop. It's the same lady. Now she's in a rocking chair. She has a different outfit on. On the next slide, same person, different. She's taken her shawl off. A little bit more. There's a type of photography that very much feels like a tableau, but it's also reminiscent of older paintings of what do I have with me to signify, what's the symbology here. There's lilacs. She has a bowl of fruit in her lap. She has a book open by her. You know, there's a formality to this that's really interesting. And again, the patience of this woman as he's learning his craft. Next slide, please. Same shot. I like this one because it looks like he's playing with the exposure. Her face is slightly overexposed as it blends in with the hair cushion. You know, it's just, these really feel like where he's studying something, learning something. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I guess that's it.
Oh, no. Anyway,
sorry.
When you go to the website, that's fine. The next slide that I expected, or when you go to the website, look for those places where there's clearly a backdrop, but the people are standing on grass. And this is part of like when he not only did formal studio portraits with people in a studio inside, but there's definitely evidence in this collection of him having like a portable studio with studio backdrops just there on the glass, on the grass. So, and on the glass. Anyway, that's my piece to share. And I'm incredibly grateful to have had a chance to work with these. Thank you so much to Joe and Linda and Sloan and all the other people who made this possible. It's an incredible gift.
Thank you very much, Meg. That's great. That's it. Sorry, we've run a little bit over here. Hope that hasn't inconvenienced people. And if you, this is the website, it's Kingsley Law Slides. I think you probably don't need to type in the HTTPS if you do kingsley.lawslides.weebly.com. So I suggest you maybe just take a picture of it with your phone if you have it nearby. If you have a smartphone, this will also be listed on our website opening page, although it is not there yet. I hope to get it there tonight. Anyway, again, just one second thank yous to Joe and to Linda and to Sloan and to the group of folks that we thanked at the beginning who funded the digitization of the slides. So that's wonderful. And, just want to say, if you like tonight's program and you like the work that the Hatfield Historical Society is doing, please consider becoming a member and or making a donation. And if you're feeling very generous, you could donate $100, because we're starting a new campaign called 100 by 100, where we're trying to get 100 people to donate $100 to fund next year's operating expenses. So if that's something that you could do, please think about it. But whatever you would be able to do would be helpful. And if you become a member, you'll get information about our programs and things. So thanks to everyone. And now we're just gonna, again, I'm sorry it's so late, but go on to questions. I'll stop sharing. And sorry we didn't have the chat available, but who's got a question? And maybe Liz, if you can kind of keep an eye out for them, maybe unmute yourself. And then you can, you or I can see them. So if someone has a question, if you can raise your hand, or just since no one's jumping up, you can just unmute yourself and ask your question. Julie, but you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, so I'm Julie. I work at the Forbes Library in Northampton.
Oh, hi, we didn't recognize you up there.
Oh, yes, I know. I got my mom hair on. So we have the Elbridge Kingsley collection at Forbes, which is amazing. And he is the older brother of the Lewis we're talking about. We do have quite a bit of genealogy information on him that I'd love to share with you too, on that family. And so Elbridge was mostly known as a wood engraver. Although he did take a lot of photographs, he also did watercolors and paintings. And he interned at the Hampshire Gazette before moving to New York to study art further. So I'm curious if Lewis ever worked at the Gazette. So I'd love to get some more information on that, because their photos do look an awful lot similar. Elbridge is 12 years older than Lewis, so I'm not sure if they ever worked together, or what influence they may have had on each other. But I think it's a great connection to the two collections.
Right. I think
so. This is so exciting.
Jump in and respond something there.
Yeah, I know that Lewis worked with Star Printers. I didn't find any record of him working with the Gazette, but he definitely worked with a printing shop.
The Star Printing Company in Northampton.
Yes, right. In Northampton. So, and we know that they were both photographers and had an artistic bent in that way together at the same time. I would love it if we could absolutely nail down for sure a picture of the two of them together. Somewhere it must be out there.
Right. I mean, it's possible that picture that Linda noted, that seemed like it was maybe, LH standing against the wagon and Elbridge in the door of the studio. But it's unclear if that's really the case, because the man standing against the wagon, he doesn't necessarily look 12 years younger than the guy that's the painter, who we know is Elbridge. So that's kind of a mystery. And also, Julie, I have some mysteries for you, because we've looked pretty closely at the collection, the great collection that you guys have online. And that's that some of those things are identified where, like, for instance, what we know to be the, traveling car of Elbridge for his painting and engraving, I think it's identified in there as the photography, traveling car or something. And we, there are other things that suggest that, it was Elbridge's, kind of painting car. And, just wondering if some of the images in your collection might actually be images of Lewis's, of the brother. So anyway, we should get together and, put our notes and our heads together and, see how we can help each other out in identifying stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of our collection, it's always attributed to Elbridge because it came from him, or it was donated later by another family member or connection. And I don't think we knew of Lewis' collection existing like this before to know if some of these, could be his brothers. There's 8 kids in the family. So whether, some of these other images are of other children, yeah, we'll definitely explore this together further to figure out. And, you know, maybe some of the stuff we have is really Lewis's. And so that, you know, to be able to relabel that properly would be
great. And I encourage everybody, if you haven't already, to check out the Forbes Library collection. They have a lot of great digital collections, but they have this fabulous collection of Kingsley images by one of the Kingsley brothers anyway. So you should check those out. Other questions out there about the collection, about the process?
Kathy.
Yes, it's John
Pease. Yeah, my great grandfather, Charles Lippingwell Ross, he was a photographer. I just wonder, you know, if any of these people cross paths anywhere along the line. He was originally out of the Webster area in Lower Connecticut, family from there, but he moved into the valley around the early 1900. So it's, you know, you never know if they shared, you know, how can you say it, you know, talk shop somewhere along the line.
Exactly. Well, it'll be good to get that information from you, John, you know, in another day, and we can take it down, and then, you know, just to be on the kind of the lookout for anything that puts the two of them together. Any
Great
other
job.
questions?
Great job.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? I'm going to try to go ahead, Meg, or do you see somebody with a question?
Oh yeah, I just see Deb and Christopher Smith have their hands up.
Okay, so maybe Deb first and then Chris. Deb, are you able to unmute yourself, or we can find you and unmute you? Let's see, Deb. Okay, so I've clicked the Ask to Unmute button. Do you have a button to click now?
I did too.
Deb, go ahead if you can. Oh, no, you're still. Okay, so do you have a little button on your screen that says unmute?
Oh, she's gone.
All right, I'll try this once more. Ask to unmute. Deb, do we have you yet? All right, let's try Chris first then.
Okay, can you hear me there?
Yes,
Kathy?
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. What was the, Kingsley lived on Prospect, near Prospect Court. What was the, what were the years that he was living there? I was just curious. The land where my building is was purchased from a Kingsley. I suppose the family was large, but if I understood in the beginning, there was actually 3 of them, different Kingsleys on Prospect. Is that the case?
Or more. I think some of the houses that were down towards the base of Prospect Street, you know, across from the Legion, I think there were 2 or 3, maybe Kingsley. I mean, correct me, people, if that you know Hatfield more, but I think there were a couple of Kingsley houses there. And then as you got further up, then there was a gap. And then as you got further up the street, like maybe what's currently like number 24 Prospect Street and maybe number 20 Prospect Street or so. And then maybe a house across the street, maybe even kind of on the corner of Prospect Court. You know, there were a lot of Kingsley houses in there. So the easel that we have in the museum that was Elbridge Kingsley's easel says that it came out of the house at 24 Prospect.
Okay, that would be Carpenter. Okay.
Right, stuff may have gotten moved around, you know, after one sibling died and then it was passed to the house of another one. So we're not exactly sure which house was which, but that's in the grouping of houses that that we're talking about.
Okay, so I'm at 19, but the deed says that this was carved out. He sold it to Edward Brer, or Dot Brer's father, to build the tobacco warehouse here. And from what I could see of it all, this Kingsley owned right up to where the McGraths were living. So it was a large chunk of land. And it was broken up after, but Brer bought the whole thing, then sold it off to Penkovsky and Jablonski on either side. So just curious. I wonder, you know, at what point that if all these family people and so on, two of them were photographers, and then this particular Kingsley actually was an accountant or whatever, and worked at the tobacco warehouse. And I don't know if there were other Kingsleys as well. Just curious how it all tied together.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so we didn't mention kind of about Kingsley's life afterwards, but he kind of seems like he got out of photography and became a town employee. So he worked for 20 years as the town clerk of Hatfield. And he was also like in the assessor's office and the, you know, committee of the water board, and I think in the treasurer's office. So for, you know, 20 plus years, he was, you know, worked for the town afterwards. So, you know, really a pretty amazing career. I think we've got Deb back on, and looks like, can we get your question now, Deb?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry
I was having
that.
technical difficulties on my side. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I was curious, how many slides are there? How many of the glass negatives are there in the collection now?
248.
248.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's definitely 200 plus, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm not sure that, like, we think there may, when you go through the website, if you do, there are a few that seem like duplicates. I think maybe in 2 cases there are, seem to be.
Yeah, there's one that's definitely, it looks like it's like 2 different exposures almost of the same ox cart and family. And then there's one other that it's just really challenging to tell the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll go through the negatives and see, you know, if there actually are 2 images like that were shot close together or whatever, or if in like almost 250 images, Sloan somehow managed to scan one twice. I'm amazed that you didn't do, like, you know, a whole bunch of them that way, if you did any at all. So yeah, so there's a lot of images here. And even the damaged ones, it's wonderful that they were saved and that you also scanned those. And Linda, had you scanned those, Sloan, because they give us so much more information, you know, and they're not really, you know, you don't really lose that much in having the crack or having the edges be bad or having the emulsion be bubbling. It just gives you an idea of the things that actually happened.
Yeah. Well,
you could also, with our technology, crop it and zoom it. So you can look at, you know, a part that isn't damaged.
There's one that I really would love if it was damaged less. There's one beautiful family grouping, and then the emulsion is just gone from one face, and that you can't.
The little boy. It's the little boy in the corner, right?
No, this one's a young woman. The little boy in the corner is also, yeah.
Maybe that was someone who didn't want to be in the picture, and they found the slide afterwards. You know, the equivalent of cutting out your photo from your, you know, high school yearbook or something.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of this project, I have had another friend reach out who was given 4,000 glass plate negatives. 4,000 glass plate negatives, and she is a photography professor at Springfield, I think it's Springfield College. And she is taking on the task of doing what Sloan did to 4,000 of them. And I'm very curious because I have a plan to go see her in the next couple of weeks to I just wonder if there's any top crossovers, like, you know, would any of L.H. Kingsley's plates be in there? I can't imagine that's necessarily one person. You know, Sloan, maybe you could, you know, I don't know if 250 slides would in this day and age, represent someone's, it's not his life's work, but, not at all, but certainly at 4,000, it's just daunting. And she's, it's amazing what she's doing. But if there's any of Hatfield, we'll find out. They're all of Western Mass, so it's good.
It's amazing. Okay, so go ahead, Liz.
I just had a question. Are you sure, are they all dated? Did they all come in a little, do you have a sense of when each of them are, or just some of them because they came in the little folders? Is there a date range that you're sure of?
There's a date range that we know there's a date range that we know he was active as a photographer.
Okay.
And there's a date range that we know in terms of the method by which the slides were made, that they can't be before, and we know when he died. So there's definitely a window.
And a few of them have dates on them.
A few of them do have, yes, like there were 14 that came in envelopes. Some of them have things written, inscribed in the emulsion to date the family photo, the Graves family reunion or other things like that. But a lot of it is extrapolation, knowing that when he opened his studio, when he learned to take photographs, when he died, it has to fit within this window.
But it's basically 1890s is what, seems to be the case for most of them. And then, there's that like image of the Civil War girls, which obviously is from an earlier time, but as Meg was saying, perhaps was a photo of a photo. And there's also, for instance, the one of Thomas Ryan in his store. It's a vertical image shot, which we didn't show tonight, but you'll see on the website. It's actually a photo that we have in our collection. So again, great to get the slide for it. And it shows his son, Bob Ryan, barefoot in, shorts and knickers, standing in front of the counter of a kind of shop tableau. There we go. Fabulous.
I think, oh, yes, there we go.
I think that is a stage set. Just looking at how shops
you can see
are at the time, I think that's a set. But like that's part of what makes this whole set, this whole collection so fascinating, is that we see not only the intended image, which like if we imagine this cropped a little so that you didn't see the top bar and you didn't see the edge of the backdrop, you'd get this lovely professional, here I am behind the counter kind of picture. But because we have the whole slide, we're sort of seeing it in some cases, this is a weird post-production, you know what I mean? They haven't gone in and cropped it exactly, because you would expose this and then crop it the way you want it and things.
Right. Yeah. So if you look over here, all of his screens, his backdrops were bought in Salem, Massachusetts. If you look down here,
that's
it's
so cool.
Isn't that amazing? So what I wanted to say about this image, though, is that it does raise some questions, because Bob Ryan, the picture that we have in our collection, says that it's Bob Ryan, who grew up to be Robert J. Ryan, who was the assistant ambassador to the UN, so one of Hatfield's famous people. It's, if he's like 4 or 5 years old, then it says circa 1920. So, all the rest of these images we're thinking are kind of like 1890s, maybe early 1900s. And then you have this one that's like 1920. So it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect. So that's a mystery to be explored a little bit. Is it actually Bob Ryan, or maybe it's not Bob Ryan? We can check the ages. Like, would his father, the parents got married anyway. In checking the dates when the parents got married and what Thomas Ryan should have looked like, does it make sense for the date it's supposed to be? Because he died in 1924. And he was, mostly doing town clerk and stuff and things then. So it would surprise me if, with a gap of 20 years, according to the photos that we have here, you then show up with this lovely tableau from the store. So that's another mystery.
Well, yeah.
I would gather that that's not from the 1920s based on the kind of photography that it was shot with. I mean, photography was photography was rapidly changing pretty much every 10 years or so, and then even faster, you know, from its inception to modern day. Even obviously digital photography is still rapidly changing, but you know, film photography was a constantly shifting thing. So it's pretty easy to determine. I would say all these photographs are from pre-1910, I would say.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that this little boy is Bob Bryant.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is maybe it's not. You know, in our collection on the photo, he's identified as Bob Bryant, but based on the dates of when Bob Bryant was born,
it may be a model. Like if that's his father and being, look, I'm your friendly shopkeeper, you know, the little boy may be completely model. Linda, would you mind clicking on, I think on your screen, it's 34. The lady in the dress. Yeah. That's the one I wanted to show, where we see the backdrop and the natural grass, and you can see along the top edge and along the right-hand side, canvas, you know, so that's letting sunlight in the top, and it's screening light from other places. So this is, you know, he's shooting in a portable studio somewhere outside with this natural grass and natural light and a painted backdrop.
And is that stump natural, or is that part of one of his props?
I think the stump is natural, and I think it, well, I think it shows up in another slide is what I actually mean to say.
It could be natural and he's just put some more things on top of it, you know.
Yeah, to make it more decorative.
Green beans wouldn't be growing off a birch stump.
Sure wouldn't. You're sure right. I think it's probably natural materials, but I don't think it.
Yeah, I love the green beans.
Yeah.
I will just say, as just a really quick thing, the picture of the store, the stage photo of the store, I just did a quick Google search for that ad. If you go back to that image, the ad that's on the wall, I just found that exact image, and it says it's from 1895.
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't think that would be an ad from the 1920s.
Right.
For sure.
So this really places it just smack in the middle of all the other photos.
Yeah.
And we'll just have to adjust our captioning accordingly.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think that glass plate negatives kind of fell out of fashion when actual plastic emulsion film came into play, because obviously glass plate negatives are heavy, they're breakable. And so when you had film photography come out with actual, you know, emulsion and plastic film, that's definitely where glass plate kind of negatives kind of fell off the wagon. And that started around the turn of the century in like 1900, 1910, when Kodak first started creating film like that, and then German companies like Agfa started following suit. So glass plates in the 20s, I mean, I'm sure there's still photographers that were shooting glass plates, especially the old kind, but I don't imagine that Kingsley would have necessarily been doing that. He probably would have moved on to other types of film, because when did he die?
1924.
1924. So maybe he didn't actually, because he did, like you said, he did become part of the government of Hatfield. So maybe he did do some other film that is someplace else now. So, you know, maybe there's some other kind of roll film someplace.
We actually have a bunch of Kingsley prints, like on matte board, that are, you know, they're not on the fancy prints that some of the other pictures that we have in the collection are. They're just kind of on a piece of matte board, you know, where they've been glued down. And in fact, you know, a lot of those images don't seem to have the quality of most of these.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they were just, you know, like every photographer, you have your great prints and you have your not so great prints, you know, if they were extras, or I'm thinking they may also have been, you know, prints and stuff that he was shooting later on when he kind of was getting out of photography, or earlier on.
And that could be because, you know, as with photography, is when digital first came out too, you know, you talk about photography as new technology of photography advanced, the newer stuff was easier, but not as good quality. So the first film cameras that were using roll film were not as good quality as the cameras that were using glass plate negatives, because the glass plates had been around for a lot longer, the cameras were built around them. Kodak wanted to make money and make cheap cameras. And so they started making these cameras use film. So the cameras that first started using film took a while to catch up before they were better technology. So just like when digital first came out, it was garbage. And most photographers were like, I'm not going to do that. You know, it took a while to take up. Yeah.
Yeah. Linda, what is this bottom one here? Yeah, that one.
This one is actually Kingsley. I think that's the
that's
Eldridge.
That's Eldridge.
That's Eldridge Kingsley.
Yeah, that's the back of his cart there.
I don't.
That's in there.
And this is, I think, this is a on location because the cart isn't near the barn that the other one was parked up.
Right. Yeah. And one of the ones that Forbes Library has up is also of this cart, but it has sides up. And I think that the one that the image of the woman who's in the sort of portable outdoor studio.
Oh, it could be underneath that.
You can kind of construct it, like, because you've got this cart, you've got a side up, you've got a tarp down. There's just a lot going on. But
he could have, I mean, I noticed that somebody at one point had said that the cart could have possibly been used for photography as well. I have a feeling that Kingsley might have been actually processing his film himself.
Yeah.
He would have been buying the film from someplace. He wouldn't have been making it. Pre his time period, people who were photographers using glass plate would have had to paint emulsion on themselves. So they would buy emulsion mixtures. They'd make the emulsion in the dark. They'd paint the emulsion onto the glass themselves, but then glass plate negative manufacturers started selling them. So he was probably buying the film at a store or someplace being shipped to him. But I think he would have been developing it. On a couple of the labeled ones, it's a label that says developed pyro. Pyro is a developer chemical that is still around to this day. So I think he was probably developing himself. So it might have been that he was actually doing that in that cart. I mean, he wouldn't have needed a lot of space to develop some film. He certainly would have just been able to just take it out. You know, you put it through the different baths and you're done. So I think it very well could have been done in the back of a cart like that pretty easily. Printing them, I don't think he would have been able to do in the cart, but he certainly could have developed the negatives.
Yep.
That's very interesting. All right, any other questions we have from folks out there? Otherwise, we'll wrap things up and let people go off and get something to eat.
The Kingsley wagon, the rear spokes are a different design than the front wheel.
Mm-hmm.
You notice the spokes. There might be a pattern that someone, was making at that time. I don't know if anybody's into the wagon wheels.
Oh, I know who we can ask.
Pull that up. It's that one.
What's the other one?
Oh, is it the damaged?
Oh, yeah.
The damaged, right, in the damaged folder, the one of Kingsley on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Here. Yeah, you see the spacing. There's several that are spaced together, up on top and the bottom, and then like 10, 11, 12, and 1 o'clock, and then the other spacing is apart.
Huh.
So I don't know if somebody, made those in the valley or somewhere, just looks a little different.
Yeah.
I think that's moonshine, the effects of too much moonshine.
John knows
there was never any moonshine.
because he is a farmer, so.
This one I think is fascinating because to get writing on you have to write it backwards. Is that correct, Sloan?
Yep.
So this is written one way. And then this one is written backwards.
Yeah. Benjamin Waite.
Sergeant.
Indian.
Yeah. Oops. My grandfather's clock. So it'd be interesting. I bet this clock is in someone's house in Hatfield right now.
So in our collection, we have 2 little booklets that seems like they were things that Elbridge Kingsley put together that were called Antiquities of Early Hatfield or something. And there's about 8 to 12 images in each of them on a cabinet card sized image. This is one of the images that my grandfather's clock, and written in kind of pencil or something on the bottom of the image, it says from Colonel Israel Williams's house.
So this leaves the my grandfather's clock might point to the sort of fanciful tableaus that they were putting together, but we are very fortunate to have the actual number, like, because Colonel Williams was not Eldridge Kingsley's grandfather, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's the same house.
Yeah.
Well,
so the glass here,
Colonel Williams.
Right. I can't get, I should not go off on another tangent. But if there's glass here, that's the green stuff.
Yeah, I was looking to see if anything was there, but anyway, we're not going to get into that tonight.
No, we're not going to get into that.
But yeah, I looked carefully through all those things to see if there's any items that we recognize from the collection. So anyway, I just want to thank everybody. I think we should probably wrap it up. Thanks everybody for staying so long. I think it was just really a fascinating discussion. Thanks so much to our panelists for being able to, you know, kind of bring so much, you know, detail and background to our knowledge of this. Again, thanks so much to the donors and the facilitators, and it's wonderful. And thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you next time, maybe in person.
Hey, have a great night, everybody. Nice to meet everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.